Our guest in studio today is Shane McSauby. Shane is a filmmaker and member of the Grand Traverse Band of Ottawa and Chippewa. He joins us to talk about roots, culture, and the empowering nature of cinema. Shane, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Now, you grew up in Michigan, were raised Roman Catholic, but then after high school fell away from that. How did you get in touch with your native roots?
I grew up here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. My family is from McSauby Town, Michigan, which is just half hour, 45 minutes north of Traverse City, small reservation town. Yeah, it was during high school, actually, I kind of faded away from the Catholicism, and I started to, and that wasn't even, had nothing to do with my native culture or anything. It just happened to be. But yeah, it wasn't until actually I saw a film called Powwow Highway where I kind of just got this urge to learn all I could about my own culture and about myself. And native culture is kind of very, it's very vast, and there's a lot of different aspects to it. Like I grew up with my grandma and my dad and my uncle. You know, it's a very non-traditional American household, but pretty traditional native, having just different parts of family there. We always had cousins and uncles and stuff staying at my house, and so, that's very native.
So you came down to the big city to study film.
Mm.
What was your interest there?
Well, I grew up going to films. I grew up going to the theater with my dad. We were kind of on the lower class side of things, and there was an Alpine 4 cinema where they had like $2 movie tickets. So we'd go see a movie, 2 movies, whenever we didn't have anything to do, we'd go see movies. So it was always a big part of my life. And when I was younger, I wanted to be an actor, like ever since I could remember. And it wasn't until high school that they introduced a film class. And that was my first time like being behind the camera and just being, kind of being able to tell my own story, even though it was just some recycled thing of everything that I had seen. But it was my first time being able to play with cameras and, kind of see my own story projected in the classroom. And that was kind of, a very empowering thing.
And we often think about, the people on camera are the ones who are famous. But in fact, the real power is the people behind the camera creating the story that the actors have to fulfill.
Yeah, for sure. And I took that class twice in high school, and the second time wasn't for credit, but it was just because I loved it so much. And it's really interesting. I had just watched some of that stuff, and you can see the first one is just a mess of everything, it's just getting my hands wet. And then the second time, you can really start seeing kind of the language of cinema being used, very basic stuff of cutting and camera movements and continuity and stuff. And it's really like, I never realized that before, but now watching kind of the evolution of understanding.
So you had a chance to come and actually get some training at Grand Valley in the film and video program. Mm-hmm. And then you left, and good things started happening to you. The people at Sundance gave you an award. Can you talk about that?
Yeah. Well, so right after I graduated GVSC, I moved to New York City, and I had no plan. I had an opportunity. Some friends were moving out there and asked if I wanted to go with them, and I said sure. And so I just packed up what I could fit on the airplane, and I went, and I was so homesick. I had never been to New York City. And so my first introduction to New York was just arriving there and trying to find our place in Harlem. And it was pretty terrifying, very humbling. That was my first time being away from home for an extended period of time. And so I really felt homesick, but more so in a sense where I really missed the land. There's a connection that I really started to understand after I moved away, that I have a connection to these lands and to these waters in Michigan. While I was there, I first connected with the Native community out there, reached out to natives.
Is there a sizable community there in greater New York City area?
Well, it's very sporadic. It's not very, it's just because there's so many people in New York City, it happens to have a huge population. But I just, I followed other young natives on Instagram, so connected that way. And that's how I met somebody who was in Anishinaabe as well. She was just there on business. And, she, me not growing up very traditional and not having that traditional knowledge instilled on me when I was younger, she was the exact opposite. She had, braids very traditional and everything. And so we just spent a few days hanging out, and we just talked about culture, and we talked about language, and it was just so cool seeing like a young person like myself who was like, you know, cool, and like she liked cool music, and she was hip, and just, but also very passionate, and using her career to forward that culture and to empower other natives. And like just those few days of hanging out, like I felt so empowered myself. And so after that, she went on her way, and I wrote a script about kind of that interaction. But also it dealt with, like, the first script dealt with that, and it dealt with my homesickness and kind of my need for family and stuff. And so that's what Minno Bimadzwin is the script is about that. And it's kind of my coping mechanism for being away from home, but also telling the story about this really cool experience that I had.
And you submitted it to the Sundance Festival?
I submitted the first draft, and then a few months later I got a call saying that I was a semifinalist for the Native Filmmaking Fellowship. I submitted a bunch of stuff after that, like draft proposals and draft mock budgets, and got another call like a month later and told me that they selected me. So.
And what did that entail then, that award?
So the fellowship, they take me down to New Mexico. We workshopped the script for about a week, and they hire a bunch of directors and producers, and so we just spent a week, and it's like 9-hour days every day for 7 days. You wake up, talk about your film, you workshop the script, and you work with, I think there was like 7 offhand, I'm not sure, but you know, all people that were native filmmakers and non-native, but directors, producers, all successful within the Sundance Film Festival circuit and within just the world film festival circuits. So, you know, we did everything. It was like script work. We worked with actors. We worked editing, and just kind of did everything with the one scene we chose for my script. Yeah, and then after that, they give us a big grant to fund the film.
So where did you shoot?
We shot here in Grand Rapids.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how can people see this?
Well, the film, so we just finished the film in November, and so we're still submitting it to film festivals and waiting to hear back. But it premiered in LA at the LA Skins Fest at the Chinese Theater,
Okay.
which is pretty cool. And then we did a local premiere here, and yeah, it's going around. There'll be another opportunity coming up here pretty soon to see it locally. And
So if people do want to see that, how can they get in touch with you, or how can they track it down?
I have a website, ShaneMcSauby.com.
Okay, we'll put that on the screen so
yeah,
people can see that.
It's got a contact page on there, but it also has the trailer for the film. So
Awesome. Yeah, we'd like to see that. So what stories would you like to tell?
all of my stories that I want to tell, you know, and it's always changing. It's always kind of, but right now, I've done a lot of rebuilding myself and reclaiming these traditions and
Sort of relearning or re-understanding your roots?
yeah, and trying to unlearn a lot. You know, we talk about decolonization, and it's unlearning some of those values that were forced upon us that teach us that, like for instance, our language isn't useful, or that our language, people were even punished for using our language.
Sure.
And just our cultures in general, like we weren't able to practice our spirituality until the 70s. Legally, like we would be arrested.
That's some major suppression.
There's a new generation coming up, and including myself and people younger, who are just really reclaiming who we are as Native people and as Anishinaabe people. So my films want to really reflect that, and I want to make films that empower, you know, the same way that film has empowered me and made me feel special and make me feel like my story is important.
So some people make films for the purpose of education, but you're not about that. Can you talk about that difference?
A lot of people in the Native community want filmmakers to use the tool as a device for education. Like everybody wants us to teach
white folks
non-natives what the Native experience is like, and I understand that because we need empathy, and I think it's important for people to do. But myself, I am more focused on empowering others, and I think that if I make films that are empowering to Native people, just to see themselves on screen and to tell them that they matter, show them their world on film, I think that's super powerful. And at the same time, non-natives can see that. You know, I want all non-natives to see my films, and even though it's of Native people, But you just watching it, you're immersed into this world, or you see what the Native experience is like, and you empathize, or you just see, you sit back and you listen, and you just watch. And I think that in itself is a tool, and I think that's more powerful than saying, well, this is what our culture
And
is.
I think for kids who don't see themselves depicted in media,
Yeah.
then there's automatically a glass ceiling. Like, okay, you know, there are all sorts of things that aren't about you, and so all of a sudden, whoa, there's somebody who looks like me.
Yeah.
That can be awfully empowering.
Yeah, I mean, I remember, you know, when I was younger, I watched Dances with Wolves 100 times because it was cool to see natives on there, but still that's like 1800s natives. And so when I saw Powwow Highway for the first time, it was like this life-changing experience for me, where I see natives on screen who are wearing like denim, and they're driving cars, and they're wearing jeans, and they look like me, they look like my family. And I just like that, just talking about it every time gives me goosebumps. And it's just, people don't think about that when they're so used to seeing people like them on screen. So for people that don't see themselves on screen, it's a very powerful thing. And yeah, I don't know, I just hope to continue to make those stories.
For a large segment of the Native population, there's a lot of disempowerment going on right now in terms of unemployment, substance abuse, and those sorts of things.
Yeah.
Can you talk about those sorts of issues?
Yeah, that's kind of why I want to use my voice as a filmmaker to empower, is because there are all of these things going on. Alcoholism is a regular part of life, and can be a regular part of life in the Native community. And myself growing up, I had, you know, alcoholism has affected everybody in my family. Myself as a Native, I don't focus on that. Like, I live a sober life in response to that, but we're allowed to look past that and just be happy, you know. And that's what I want. I want to show those little human aspects of our lives, of where, yeah, there is this and there is that, but that's not the focus of the story. Moving past that and using our old ways and our traditions to kind of combat alcoholism and you know, other things like that. And I think I look at that as all just kind of an effect of the colonial system. And that's a lot of stuff was introduced to us, including alcohol, and used as a kind of warfare, chemical warfare. And it's just something that still plagues us. We just need more people to lead by example, and which is what I try to do with my sobriety. And I try to stay very vocal about it, show young ones there are Native people out there who are sober and who are doing things.
So we have to wrap up in a minute, but if you were standing in front of an audience of white folks, non-Native folks, what would you like to say?
I don't know. I would have to say just sit back and listen, support Indigenous uprising, support us in that we just want to empower ourselves, and we want to restore our relationship with the land and with the waters. I also see all these, lately it seems like there's all these new studies being released, and it's like studies that Indigenous Knowledge has already been saying for thousands of years, but they're like, well, we have these new studies now that are saying this. And it's just things like that, you know. Like,
there was a lot of wisdom here before 500 years ago when Europeans started coming.
Yeah, you know, our bodies are tied to this land, and we kind of know the land. So, yeah, I don't know. I would just say listen and support us in what we do.
Awesome.
And also, like, learn who was originally there and who is there still. Like, you know, so many people don't know that. So many people don't know what Anishinaabe means. So many people don't know what Odawa, Ojibwe, Potawatomi. They just, you know, it's really simple. You can just look up who the original inhabitants of the lands were. And when you go travel someplace else, one of the first things that I do, because I don't know every nation in this,
there are hundreds.
Continent, so I'll Google, try to learn as much as I can just to, you know, before I go somewhere.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate your coming and sharing time with us today.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Good luck in your film endeavors, and we'll look forward to staying in touch with you and seeing great things.
Thank you.
Thanks for coming. Thank you for joining us. If you're watching on TV, stay tuned for our following segments on information and humor. If you're watching us on the internet, I hope you will check out our other conversations with the passionate people who are working to make this a more inclusive community for all.